Okay, y'all, welcome to my garden. This is a garden tour. Right now, I cannot seem to get the camera to be willing to go live on YouTube with the normal orientation, so I'm gonna have to do it this way for now. Well, this is my Three Sisters garden here. Three Sisters garden is historically the one the American Indians used. It was corn, squash. It was corn, beans, squash, and watermelon, because the Indians viewed watermelon and squash as both vine crops. So they were one sister. Now, there is the most that's the most useful way if you want to get the most amount of food per square foot of soil based on how much sunlight's hitting each square foot of soil. You'll make the most amount of food for the available sunlight using a Three Sisters garden, because the remaining sunlight that normally would hit the ground that goes between the corn leaves would, instead of having produce weeds, the beans and squash, which don't require much sunlight to produce food, will soak that up, produce food with it. Now, yes, they'll be more productive if they're raised in full sun and got more sunlight, but they don't need that much to produce. So it's a really useful thing, and the beans also provide nitrogen for the corn. This is my thing. I usually plant nice big patches here. I have some strips in here where I plant melons and squash. So that's this. Now over here we have a mulberry tree, which I have let grow up. It was tiny, and this year I am going to go and pot it up. Mulberries are extremely healthy. They're a good way to produce phytonutrients that can help you stay healthy. Like a little pharmacy here. There's healthy nutrients. They're delicious. I love mulberries. And so I'm going to pot that up and transplant that. Now over here, like I was saying, beans do produce more if raised in full sun. So for maximum productivity, I also got lots of fences here for pole beans. I can raise lots of pole beans on these things. Now in here is enough space here that I can raise another row down here of something else. Amaranth or whatever I want to raise down here can go down here. Here's another one, another row for beans. I got some other beans that are growing here, and I'm going to transplant some of these because the roots are perennial. So I got this, and I got enough row down here. I can put another row of something else down here, fava beans or something else down here. So you have room here. And then here's another row for pole beans again. Now, over here is now I kind of keep my garden divided up into a Three Sisters garden and legumes, as you've seen. I also have a cabbage patch every year. And then I also have root crops, and I have tomato, basil, and herbs and hot peppers and stuff growing. Now, the root crop patches are best, again, if you raise them in beds, it takes a little more weeding time, but you'll get so much more food per square foot. You raise them in beds. Now, so this is where I put my beds of different things. Now, important thing to remember is if you raise bush beans alternating years in your root crop patch, you alternate half of it 1 year as bush beans, half is root crops, and next year you switch it back and forth. You actually add nitrogen to the soil. And bush beans don't require you to set up fences and take them down. So that's why it's quite beneficial. I also raise a lot of zucchini here. Over here is some kohlrabis that are still growing. Depending where you're in the country, you can actually raise these all winter, the winter over. So, to continue the tour this way, here's my hoop house, which I have set up. And right here is tomatoes that are ripening. Given how it's getting to get cool in the nights and stuff, tomatoes require heat to ripen. I think those ought to ripen in the house. I'm also take cuttings of those and I'll root them so I can have tomatoes growing in the house. But I have a hoop house here. This gives me an early start in the spring. Slide the plastic down on the side. I'll pull it back over right where I need to. Now coming over here, this is another fence for raising peas on it. Now over here, this is a damask rose. Now this is actually a tripling gate, or there's another name for it, but it's the commercial rose historically used to make rose perfume oil. Now over here is a blush damask. Wonderful rose hips. I mean, one of the best rose hips I've ever raised. And this is believed to be from Scotland, but it's one of the earliest recorded damask roses in Europe. Even though damask roses are thousands of years old from the Middle East. This here is an apple tree. heirloom apple. If I remember right, it's a Newtown Pippin, which I think is Thomas Jefferson's favorite apple, if I remember right. Down this way, this was an attempt at a hybrid tea rose. It grew fine. When I had it sheltered with like a hoop house over it in the wintertime, I tried it without it and it didn't survive. So I believe that's actually the rootstock coming back up. Let's see what variety that is. And of course, by it, roses love garlic, so here's garlic growing. That's elephant garlic. This here is a moss damask rose. They are unique in that they have a really fine thorns on them, like almost like a fur. And the buds have this fragrant, trying to think of how to describe it. It's like a dew on the sepals, on the base of the flower, that has a very camphor aromatic smell to it. Very popular in the Victorian ages. This was a rage all back then. Well, if you think about the old Victorian, romantic Victorian roses, this is what they were raising. Now down this way, I have you ever heard of heliculture? Well, raised beds. Here's my raised beds I'm working on. I have growing them hazelnuts. Now, you want a plant has good drainage. Raising a raised bed is great for that. It also helps the soil warm up quicker. So here is hazelnuts here. They are really suckering out nicely. I shall be soon be getting a crop on them relatively soon. Don't know if it'll be next year or the year following. Here's another hazelnut. Now these are Theta and Eta hazelnuts out of the Pacific Northwest. They are eastern blight hazelnut blight resistant varieties. Here's another one. Now over here, you got more hazelnuts. Now these hazelnuts over on this side of the raised beds are the Beast and Grand Traverse. They actually were specifically bred for the Midwest. These over here were bred for Eastern United States, Midwest, by people on the West Coast, as far as I understand, whereas these actually were part of a Midwest breeding program. Most of the other breeding programs are coming out of Minnesota or the Pacific Northwest, and that one I believe actually came out of Michigan State University, if I remember right. So now this raised beds also provides something additional. It provides a place a little less windy that the kids can play in the grass here. My daughter has her balancing beam, and it's in good view from the house, yet from the road and other things, it provides a little privacy. Blocks all the stuff from the road and the wind, some. And it provides a little like house-like atmosphere for them to have a table out here if they want and have a tea party if they want. My daughter wants to play that way. And the walls make like a pretend walls for like a house here. Then heading this way, past my pea fence, which in the spring is really tasty, we have Starva Vineyard. Now these here are grapes I got growing. Now this spring are going to have to be put on a trellis. But here's some more grapes here. They've been growing for a couple years in the ground now. Now these are Concords, Catabauls, and Niagaras. So here's some leaves there, and here's another one there. Over here, we have a blackberry patch getting started. Here's another blackberry down here. Growing nicely. Eventually, I wanted to have a large blackberry patch. But you plant a few blackberries, they'll spread. They'll multiply naturally. Now over here is horseradish. I love horseradish. It's one of the easiest things you'll ever grow. It will, once you get it started, it'll just come up wild. In fact, the interesting story to these is these horseradishes, the people that used to live here back 30, 40 years ago, the mother would peel horseradish and the father, and they'd make, I was told they made a lot of horseradish sauce and grated horseradish and passed out jars to all the neighbors. Everyone, they were famous for giving jars of horseradish to everyone. Well, when they were done peeling all the horseradish and cutting the tops off all the horseradish they harvested from their garden, they threw it all in the ditch across the road from us. And those tops that they tossed in the ditch, just as a way to throw them away, those tops sprouted. And till this day, there is horseradish growing wild in that ditch across the road from us. So I was able to dig up some of that wild horseradish and plant a row here. And literally just dug some plants up and stuck in the ground, and it's grown wild here ever since. Now here I have a couple apple trees growing. Here's another one. Small apple tree started, rootstock there. Over here is an elderberry bush I got going. People say how healthy elderberries are. Here's an elderberry growing. Over there on the property line is another mulberry. It should start producing berries next year if it hasn't done a few this year. From the corner over here is my place I've stuck chickens and ducks when they weren't behaving themselves and being nice to the rest of the flock. Now up over this berm here is some wild horseradish, just growing wild, where there was a few roots got moved accidentally in dirt when I was building the berms, and they came up. Here is a rose. I love roses. This is a beautiful pink-ish rose, rambling rose. Now this is a nice success story. This is an apple tree I grafted. I learned how to graft apple trees in college and went back to doing it to provide myself a cheaper way of getting more trees of extremely rare varieties. And I had to leave this for a couple years and not tend to it, thought it died, came back, and lo and behold, it has grown nicely. So I'm gonna get this more cleaned up in here. There's bearded flags I got started there. And that's the bulk of my tour of my garden. A few more spots that I got to get worked on and established well. Hope you all liked it. Any questions on food, nutrition, on how to plan your garden so you can live off it, and what to eat to stay healthy, self-sufficient? Local food's the way to go. Our electrical grid is not very stable. Our fuel is uncertain given crisis overseas. Crisis overseas can cause a thing, and that can affect supply chain disruption. But if you raise your own food, it'll be healthier, fresher, more nutritious, and it'll always be there for you. You can make your garden your store you go to. Want more information like this? Like and subscribe.